Happy Friday. Yeah, I'm starting this episode out, which I hate doing. Tara's our intro, but we're just gonna go with it. So today's gonna be fun because we're doing conspiracies, which I love. And this one goes pretty deep down the rabbit hole. But I want everyone to just keep in mind this is just a conspiracy. Let's just have fun with it. Don't get all doom and gloom. We're just doing this for fun. But I had to do it because I posted a TikTok video the other day where I was asking everyone, like, does anyone else notice the crescent moon constantly being on the bottom? And this has been happening for months now. Instead of on the side, like we all grew up with, it's consistently on the bottom. And it's driving me crazy because, like, my entire life, I have always looked at the moon. I don't ever remember seeing the crescent on the bottom making this, like, sort of smiley face. But then it's like all of a sudden, for the last few months, it's consistently on the bottom. But when I bring it up to people, in my life, like I get a shrug and it's like, yeah, so. And it's just driving me nuts because I'm like, this is why am I the only one that thinks this is a big deal? That like the moon has changed. Like, aren't you curious why? And no one seems to be curious why. So I went to TikTok and I created a video. And I wanted to see like if this was a Mandela effect where you have masses of people that remember something one way, but then you have other people that remember it completely different. So let me ask you, Tara, do you ever remember the crescent moon being on the bottom? And have you seen it where you're at in Europe on the bottom instead of the side?
I honestly haven't paid any attention, which makes me feel very ignorant because, I'm all into moon manifestation and stuff. But I typically only focus on the moon during like new moons and full moons. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I look at the moon during the other phases, but it's never dawned on me that it's on the bottom or the side.
Well, you'll have to, well, not now because it's a full moon, but you'll have to look in the next few weeks and see. But I asked our TikTok audience and they went wild for this video. There were so many comments saying that they've noticed this too, and they thought that they were the only one. And so I went on a deep dive and I looked up like the Farmer's Almanac, and it shows all the moon phases with the crescent being on the side. There's no phase with it on the bottom. Same with NASA. The only thing I could find with the crescent on the bottom were like images of ancient artifacts from like Mesopotamia and like the Babylonian calendar. And there were some articles stating that the moon does have a phase that can show up like once or twice a year between January and March. And it's called the I can't say that word, Cheshire.
Cheshire.
Thank you.
Cheshire.
Thank you. So that's the name for it. I like literally can't say it. I don't know what's wrong with me.
For once,
Um,
it's you and not me.
yeah, I can't, I'm not even gonna try to say it because I'm just like going on 5 hours of sleep right now. But yeah, so it's only supposed to be there for like a couple of days out of the year. But it's been consistent for months and it's still happening in May. So like they're saying when it does happen, it's between January and March. Well, it's May and the moon is still doing that. And the only place where the moon is consistently on the bottom, like all year round, is in the tropics. But I've got people noticing this from all over the country on our TikTok. So what the heck?
Yeah, I was actually once we started talking about doing this topic, then I started looking into it. And I saw this article on nasa.gov and it was from back in 2002. And someone had asked why the crescent moon was lit on the bottom. And the answer that was given on NASA was that, oh, it's just the result of the moon's orbit around the earth and the sun. And like whether you see the moon in the shape of a U where it's lit on the bottom or like the backwards C, it just depends on the season and what latitude you're at. But like you said, it also talked about how this typically only happens once or twice a year in polar regions. So that would
Yeah.
not explain why it's happening now.
And honestly, like that's why I ignored it at first because I thought, well, maybe there's just some astrological event. But after like months of this, I'm like, okay, this is not normal. And that's why I was thinking maybe it is a Mandela effect. And like people were also in this thread on TikTok, they were saying that they've noticed that the sun looks different as well ever since the eclipse. And I've noticed this too, but again, I haven't said anything because I don't want to sound like a freaking crazy person. But everyone was saying exactly what I've been saying, which is that it's much brighter and whiter. And like instead of the yellowish hue, it's like freaking bright. Like it is white, bright light. And so the other thing that's been happening recently is there's like all these videos going all over social media where it appears like there's something behind the sun. And so people are speculating, saying, like, well, there's actually two suns in our solar system, but like no one ever told us about this. I don't know about all that, but all I know is there are video after video of just normal people recording the sun with their phone, and you see something behind it. And it just like a lot of comments of people saying that something just feels off. And like ever since the eclipse, it's like just something isn't quite right, but you can't really figure out what it is. And the explanation that almost everyone agreed on that kept coming up over and over and over in the comments was that could this mean that the magnetic poles are flipping? So, Tara, have you ever heard of the pole shift theory?
Only very briefly until I started looking into it for this episode.
Okay, so I heard about this. I think it was on Joe Rogan actually. Like some scientist was talking about it. But there's this theory that every 5,000 to 10,000 years, the magnetic poles shift and it causes this like cataclysmic event that's basically like a global reset where it wipes out almost everyone and everything. And then like civilization has to start over again. And this theory comes from a book that was written by Chan Thomas in the 60s called The Adam and Eve Story. Well, what makes this book so unique is that the CIA confiscated it and banned the book from being distributed. But why? Like, that makes me think, okay, this isn't just some story. Like, why do they want this book? What is the CIA so worried about? Well, they finally had to release a sanitized version of it because of a FOIA request. So I read it and wow, like it totally explains why all these unusual things would be happening on Earth. And so let's take a look at like who is the author? Who is Chan Thomas? He was actually a world authority on cataclysmic geology, which I didn't even know was a thing. Apparently it is. And he was like world renowned. And he offered all kinds of like new theories on the pyramids and those big statues at Easter Island. And he was known for predicting major earthquakes accurately. And so in this book, he ties basically every civilization and religion throughout history to all being destroyed by a great flood. And these floods are all caused, according to him, by the magnetic poles flipping. So in the book, he goes into depth on how this happens by like explaining the magnetic and electrical structure of the earth. And once every few thousand years, neutral matter escapes from the inner core of the earth to the outer core. And that's what causes this, like, he says it's literally an atomic explosion inside the earth, which completely disrupts the electrical and magnetic structure of the earth, pulling the magnetic poles to the equator. And that's where the flip happens. And so I'm going to read directly from the book on like what exactly that means. So it says, in a quarter to half a day, the poles move almost to the equator and all hell lets loose. The atmosphere and oceans don't shift with the shell. They just keep on rotating west to east. And at the equator, that speed is 1,000 miles per hour. It has to be normally to make one rotation per day. So while the shell shifts with the poles going toward the equator, the winds and oceans go eastward, blowing across the face of the earth with supersonic speeds, inundating continents with water miles deep. Okay, so Tara, like, is that not the most terrifying scenario you could imagine? Like having these waves that are miles deep?
Well,
It's
it's
so
funny because like I think most people listen to us instead of watch us, but I caught my like expression on my face when I looked at the video while you were reading that. So yeah, a little terrifying.
a little terrifying, but don't be too terrified yet because I'm going to give some other perspectives after we get through this one. But this would explain why they found frozen mammoths with food still in their stomach, like in the Arctic, like they were flash frozen. And Antarctica used to be tropical. This is like now a pretty renowned, like accepted theory, that the Arctics were tropical and the deserts used to be tropical. And this would explain why there's like seashells literally in the walls of the pyramids. And it would explain like the lost city of Atlantis being under the sea. And so in this book, he lays all of this out. He lays out every time in history that this happened. And he shows this graphs, and it shows that it happens in intervals of 5,000 to 10,000 years. The last time it happened was 6,500 years ago. So we're in a time frame where theoretically it could happen. And now, like you keep seeing again on social media, these posts that are saying that flowers are blooming in Antarctica. And then we have like the moon and the sun looking different, almost like we shifted. So, like the way that I was thinking about this before I went on TikTok and like saw the whole pole shift thing was, if our entire lives the moon was on the side and now all of a sudden it's on the bottom, maybe like something is shifting in Earth. Like that would explain it, right? And even modern scientists are backing this up. So, according to the NOAA, the west to east super fast winds that are circling the North Pole have completely reversed twice this year. And that is not normal. And so scientists are saying that the North Magnetic Pole has moved 600 miles since the first measurement was taken in 1831. And the migration speed went from 10 miles per hour or per year to 34 miles per year. So these scientists are saying that the acceleration could indicate the beginning of a field reversal, but it's very hard for them to say, or to like say with certainty, because they only have 200 years worth of data. So that's a little alarming.
Yeah. And like once I started going down the rabbit hole of what I could find, I found this very interesting article, and it was talking about a BBC science focus report that said the pace of the North Pole shift was roughly like 15 kilometers per year until the 1990s. And since then, it's been accelerating and reaching like 55 kilometers per year. But even though the poles shift in intervals every few thousand years, the geological history of Earth indicates that a complete polar flip, where like north becomes south and south becomes north, only occurs every 200,000 to 300,000 years. And according to NASA, Earth's geological history shows that this has happened 183 times in the last 83 million years. And the last record of a total reversal was like 780,000 years ago. So it would seem like we are like long overdue for another complete polar flip. And data indicates that like over the past 200 years, Earth's magnetic field has weakened by 9% globally. And this BBC Science report said that the shift of the Earth's magnetic field poses potential risk to life because this magnetic shield is like a protective barrier around the planet, and it protects us from the onslaught of particles from like the sun's solar wind and from high energy cosmic rays from outer space. And when there's changes to the magnetic field, they affect not only like modern technology and navigation tools, but they affect the internal magnetic compass that like birds and animals rely on for survival. And supposedly we don't need to worry anytime soon because paleomagnetic studies indicate that the Earth's magnetic field has stayed consistently strong for the past 100,000 years, and scientists are estimating it will take at least another 1,300 years for a complete decay. But considering like we've had all these solar storms lately, these rare geological, astrological events, and like we talked about this on a prior podcast, we know the solar cycle is nearing its 11-year culmination, which means the possibility of even more severe and more powerful solar storms. And I feel like even if we're not approaching like a full-on cataclysmic event that wipes out the population, we're so entirely dependent on modern technology and our day-to-day lives that even a minor shift in the poles that impacts the Earth's magnetic shield could potentially cause like significant disruptions to our way of life.
Yeah. And I mean, that's terrifying that we're way past due according to
Yeah.
that. but also like all these solar storms, it's like, well, that sure as hell can weaken the magnetic field. So it's just crazy. But like I want to point out too that the Adam and Eve story is just a theory. So this like super quick quarter to half a day pole shift, like that is literally just a theory. But I do think it's super strange that the CIA got involved and has like tried to keep the public from reading it. I mean, that's just strange. And then I'm thinking, if that's the sanitized version, what does the real version say?
Right.
You know? So it also got me thinking about CERN and the Hadron Collider there, and then HARP and DARPA and like everything they're doing at all these scientific stations in Antarctica. And it made me wonder, like, maybe all this crazy shit they're doing is to try and stop this pole reversal from happening. You know, like, what if it's not like all bad? Like, I just tend to think like, oh, they're going to use it as a weapon, but maybe it's like literally they're trying to save the planet and like save us from this pole reversal. I don't know. It could be. I'm just throwing it out there. Um, I can't find this clip now, or maybe I can. Oh, yeah. Okay. I have a clip because this was nagging on me. It's been nagging on me ever since I first heard it. And what it is a video of Trump saying, like, very matter of fact, that it's going to get colder. It's going to get like a lot colder. So just listen to this. It's super short.
This summer, you may have learned that we broke a world record in the Valley, 130 degrees, but even in greater LA, 120 plus degrees. And we're seeing this warming trend make our summers warmer, but also our winters warmer as well. So I think one area of mutual agreement and priority is vegetation management. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key. If we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay. It'll start getting cooler.
I wish
You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows actually.
We've had
Okay. I don't know if you could hear him at the end, but the guy's like, I wish science agreed with you. He's like, oh, and he starts like laughing. He's like, I don't think science knows. That has like bothered me since I heard it. And this was during the pandemic because the guy had a freaking mask on. He's like, basically he's saying, Trump is saying it's going to get colder. And the guy, of course, is there to talk about like global warming and like climate change. And Trump, like everyone should go look at that video because Trump, you could just tell as this guy's talking, Trump's looking at him like, you fucking idiot. He's got that look on his face. And then he just says, so matter of fact, it's going to get colder. And the guy's like, oh, well, science says. And Trump's just dead serious. And he's like, I don't think they know. And then he kind of like laughs. It freaked me out because who would be privy to something like this? Like you would think the president of the United States. And I just felt like he was hinting at something that he knows but is not allowed to say like out loud. And so that like totally freaked me out because that would align with this whole theory. If things got a lot colder, well, that would happen if the poles flipped because then Antarctica would become tropical again and we would get, that cold Arctic weather. So I felt like he was hinting at something, but I'm a conspiracy theorist. What do I know? And at the end of the day, like again, these are all just theories. No one knows. And we can't predict Mother Nature, right? It's like we can't worry about something like this because the truth is we're more likely to walk outside and get hit by a bus or die in a car accident or like have a heart attack. You know what I mean? Like, and we can't worry about some hypothetical cataclysm. So I don't want people to like freak out and think that we're doomed, but I do think it's interesting and it's good to like open our minds to new ideas and theories and just accept that a lot of what we've been taught is a total lie. Like a lot of what we learned in the school system, in history books, they're all lies written by the people that won the wars. So I personally think that it's great to just be hungry for knowledge and truth, but not to dwell on it. Like you've got to have that balance, just have fun with it.
Yeah, but I want to bring in the whole like climate crisis narrative because That's what this got me thinking of. And I read this National Geographic article. It was from July of last year. And it was talking about how the Earth's magnetic poles don't cause climate change. And it even mentioned that Adam and Eve theory and debunked it as a conspiracy. But then again, like Nat Geo is owned by Disney, which is basically owned by the cabal. So, like, who knows what's truth and what's fiction, right? Well, apparently there was a study done back in 2021 related to what's called the last Champs excursion. And I guess this was the last major geomagnetic excursion or like variation in magnetic field intensity. And it occurred around 41,500 years ago. And when this happened, the Earth's magnetic field rapidly weakened and the poles flipped. And then 500 years later, the poles reversed again. So this study was done in 2021. It connected the last Champs excursion to climate upheaval, extinction events, and even changes in human behavior. And scientists at the time were hypothesizing that when the Earth's magnetic field is weaker than normal, increased solar cosmic radiation can penetrate the Earth's atmosphere, which can then like alter ozone levels and drive global climate shifts and extinctions. So this was debunked by NASA, and they were saying there's no evidence of this, and current data doesn't support these claims, and like climate change doesn't line up with this magnetic excursion or any other notable pole shifts that occurred over the last 70,000 years. But if that's the case, and polar shifts have no correlation with climate change, why is NASA currently conducting experiments with their pre-fire program, which, by the way, stands for Polar Radiant Energy in the Far Infrared Experiment? And they're doing these experiments to determine how heat is lost from the Earth's poles. And according to space.com, these experiments literally started last week. And the whole point is to, quote, help scientists study how different properties at the poles, such as clouds, humidity, and fluctuation of the surface between frozen and liquid states, contribute to the dissipation of heat lost to space. The Arctic is warming faster than anywhere on Earth, leading to paradigm shifts for local populations and wildlife habitats at the poles, as well as global ramifications such as rising sea levels. Ultimately, pre-fire information is going to be combined with our climate models, and hopefully we'll be able to improve our ability to simulate what sea level rise might look like in the future and how polar climate change is going to affect the weather systems around the planet, end quote. Stephanie, does that not sound to you like NASA believes polar shifts are somehow related to fucking climate change?
Oh, absolutely. But at the end of the day, like, I don't believe NASA either. I feel
I
like
know.
they are so like part of this whole narrative. And you mentioned Disney earlier, and like fun little fact, Walt Disney and Werner von Braun, the Nazi that became the head of NASA, they were best friends. And if you look at some of the original films that Disney made, Walt Disney, there's a lot of weird stuff in there that I think is subliminal conditioning. So like that could be fun for anyone listening. Go and like check out that stuff because it's I feel like NASA is like literally exists to pull the wool over our eyes. So I don't know, but I think that we like if we're observing with our own eyes and like seeing things that are not normal, like the crescent on the bottom and the sun looking different and all these things, like you just gotta like you can't ignore that. Like I don't know how so many people are ignoring that. It's like be a
Right.
little curious, you know? But I would say, yeah, I agree. I think that there are polar shifts or something happening and it would destroy their whole narrative because then that would mean the climate change isn't caused by driving a car, a gas car, you know? So yeah, it'll be interesting what comes out with all this because I feel like it's pretty obvious, but apparently people are ignoring it. So anyhow, I would love to hear everyone else's theories. Come and join the TikTok feed because I mean, my gosh, like we're having a ball over there talking about all these different possibilities. But I want to end on this like little fun fact. So scientists just discovered another ocean under our Earth's crust and get this, it's 3 times bigger than all of the oceans combined. So, all the oceans we have on the surface, this is 3 times bigger and it's inside the earth. So, just when we think that we've discovered like everything that there is here on earth, No, we have not. There's still so much more to discover. And I think that's exciting. I think it's pretty cool. Also a little terrifying, but I think it's, it's something like fun to look into.
Wow.
So yeah. Um, that's what we have today for conspiracy. I hope we didn't freak anyone out too much, but I do want to know, wherever you guys are in the world, go on TikTok and let me know what you see. The next time there is a crescent moon, is it on the bottom or is it on the side? And just start watching it daily. And I want to know, like, where in our, different countries and everything, where this is happening, or if it's happening like everywhere. So let me know. I'm very curious, obviously. And we'll go from there. I'll keep you updated on my little theory. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here next time.